welcome to Let's Plant Houses, the podcast where we talk about some incredible families' journeys. And I'm your host, Wendy Ernson. So whether you're a family member, a caregiver, or someone just looking to learn, you're in the right place. This season, I've expanded the conversation to welcome adult siblings on the show who have siblings with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I wanted to tell this story because I don't think I think that these stories are rarely heard and deserve to be shared. So I'm excited to have Lee Ackerman here today. So thank you so much for joining me on the show.
You're welcome, Wendy. It's a pleasure to meet you and to take part in the show.
Excellent. So Lee, could you just start by telling us about your family now and when you grew up?
Yes. I am now the guardian of my developmentally disabled younger sister, Gretchen. We were two children, and she was a normal young lady who, as she was two, started losing skills in the late 60s and having horrific hour-long temper tantrums and outbursts. And it was the 60s, and they finally found at the end of June a brain tumor and did emergency surgery to remove it, and told our parents, I think 5.5 or 6. There we go, got the right age there. 6, and told our parents that she would be home and fine in 2 weeks. And the best guess they have is that she had a massive stroke shortly after surgery.
Wow.
Which burned out all sections, all parts of the brain in many ways. So, there were the two of us and our parents. Several years later, our folks divorced. Several years later, they both remarried. So I am actually the middle child of 11 people.
Wow.
Yeah. One real sister, one half sister, 5 stepsisters, 3 stepbrothers.
Wow.
And so Gretchen and I have a half sister and 3 younger stepsisters. The stepsisters never knew their parents, essentially their father, as he died when one of them was a baby, and the other 2, my stepmom was pregnant with twins. So they grew up with my father being their father, our father being their father. So there would be anywhere from 5 of us to 6 of us living together in that wonderful American blended family of moving back and forth between homes as we grew up. So quite a bit of us, and Gretchen was always included. And it was a challenge. She, after the surgery, lived in neonatal ICU for most of that summer and into the fall.
And how old was she then?
She turned 3 in the hospital.
Okay.
So this was just after her 3rd birthday.
Mm-hmm.
Mom moved into Sparrow Hospital ICU because my sister was pulling out all of her tubes, scratching herself. It was horrible. I moved our grandparents' house on Lake Michigan that summer. 6, not really sure what's going on.
Yeah.
And everybody was really hushed because I'm a 6-year-old.
Right.
And going to Mass. It's the first time I remember going to Mass and praying for my sister. And let me tell you, as much as I love my sister, even before the brain tumor, she was the biggest pain in the ass of a younger sister. Remember when Tonka trucks and toys were like real metal and great big things?
Yes.
Yes. She would sneak up behind me and wallop her older brother with those over the head and go running.
Gosh.
And at that point in time, older brothers didn't beat up on their sisters. Later on in life, when I was outnumbered 5 or 6 to 1, and they do not fight fair, I learned what you had to do to take care of yourself.
Jeez. So I guess she had this brain tumor, so that's probably when you realized that she was a bit different when she came back, right?
Yeah, I mean, really realized it. I returned home at the end of August and started 1st grade.
Right, because you were just probably 6 or 7 then,
6
right?
then, yep.
Okay.
And I would go from school to the hospital because Gretchen was still really in bad shape. And, the things you realize, you can look back on it now and you realize some things. I mean, her first word again was Lee, which is what she will still yell at me 56 years later.
Right.
Yeah, Lee. So, I think I really realized the severity of it. The day my mom and I got off the elevator at the hospital, and one of the nurses was holding Gretchen, a 3-year-old, cradling her over her shoulder. And we walked up behind Gretchen, and Gretchen didn't see us.
Mm-hmm.
She had been identifying Mom and I and Dad by our voices. And that's when the look on Mom's face when she realized she was blind was just that kind of sunk in on how bad things were.
So was she
Her
blind?
her vision centers were, no, she was not. She was a normal, healthy child before the brain tumor.
Wow.
Her vision centers were burned out. And, this was back before MRIs and back before all the medical technology.
Yeah.
So her vision centers were burned out, and the brain is truly a wonderful thing. For years and years and years, her eyes, she didn't have muscle control of her eyes, and they would just kind of rapidly go back and forth, especially when she was tired. But she's regained her vision.
Wow.
She reads and writes at about a 5 to 7-year-old level.
How old was she when she restored when her vision was restored?
It's really hard.
Or estimate.
Yeah, I mean, 5-ish, 4-ish.
Wow.
I mean, the brain, there were so many things going on and going wrong. I mean, It was not, she was healthy as a horse, but, she had less motor skill than a newborn baby. Mm. And as a 3-year-old, she had to learn how to talk. Took decades, walk again with hand crutches, how to feed, how to dress herself, how to use the bathroom. All of those skills had to be started over in a 3-year-old and skill acquisition. So it's hard to tell. I think there are pictures of her when she's probably 5 or 6 with glasses. So by that point in time, and I would have been 8 or 9 then. The vision testing was back that she could see.
Okay.
It was processing things. And reading continues to be a difficulty for her.
Okay.
A significant difficulty. So hand crutches for walking, wheelchair for distance. She behaviorally, and I speak from experience with 7 sisters, 13-year-old girl from hell. The rules do not apply to her. She has, I cannot count the amount of times that I've been in an emergency room with my sister for not following safety rules or accidents or whatever. And that's, as an adult traveling with her, she managed to shut the bathroom at the Salt Lake City Delta Airport because she didn't use grab bars, and we had the police, EMTs. My spouse had one Delta flight agent. I had another one in the bathroom with me, and there was blood on all 4 walls of the very large handicapped stall.
Oh my God.
Because she went face down or head down and put a great big gash in her scalp for refusing to follow safety rules, i.e. hang on to handbars in the bathroom. Wow. And that incident was only 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. So it's an ongoing set of things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it was probably challenging growing up with your sister at times.
Yeah. And then after the divorce, single parent. Mom had to go back to school. They separated Christmas Eve, and it had been a bad, horrible 2 years for my parents.
Yeah.
on so many fronts. And Dad was a Christian Scientist, and anything to do with medical treatment, hospitals for himself, let alone for his severely disabled child, was outside his realm of experience or expertise.
Yeah.
And until his 70s, 60s, his staff would call me and say, call your dad. He's got a dentist appointment coming up. He thinks he's dying, because he'd have to go into a dentist. And that just, was not
It was traumatic for him.
right, because there was no medical. They were devout Christian Scientists growing up.
Okay.
And so none of that was there for Dad. So Mom, thankfully, got a job. A school teacher went out pregnant at her old school district, at her old school. And they hired her back on starting the day school opened in January. But the caveat was she had not kept up with her education credits, continuing ed. So with 2 young children, one being severely disabled, she had to go back to school at night.
Okay.
And on those things, they had to bring in early behavior intervention people in the home.
Sure.
Gretchen could throw temper tantrums. So imagine a 6-year-old in bed screaming and kicking for 3 to 5 hours and throwing everything.
Yeah.
And there I am as the older brother babysitter with the neighbors coming in, knocking on the door, wondering what I'm doing to my sister. Are you beating your sister? I was actually asked by the neighbors. I'm like, no. Asked her, the protocol is she has to take off her coat and put it away when she comes home, and then come out to the kitchen for snack. And
you were how old then?
Oh, 4th grade, 5th grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot of responsibility.
It was. And that was one of the things Mom regretted. And yet, what choices?
Right.
In the 60s and the 70s, there was no funding. There was no home supports, no self-direction waivers. The early special ed transportation in Lansing, Michigan, God bless him, and I'm blanking on his name. He started a company to transport kids and was getting paid nothing. Mm-hmm. And he had a fleet of Oldsmobile station wagons. And we were living in an apartment. There was no wheelchair vans. And I would wait either at the sliding door watching for the car to show up, or in the center hallway of the apartment, because there was no handicap parking or anything then. Right. And I would piggyback Gretchen out to the car. Somebody would get out, open up the door. I would pivot around and drop her on the seat to get her in the car, because there was nothing then.
Right. And you just did what you had to do.
Did what I had to do, did what we had to do. And, I then would drop Gretchen off, walk over to the next apartment building, pick up my friends, and go on to school.
Yeah, and I know that it's not like, it is just what it is. And your mom she did what she had to do at the time, and she made the best decision she could make with the information that she had and the resources that were available to her. But it's still very hard.
Yeah, and it made us close, but it also,
you grew up really fast.
Oh yeah. And we also joke, for anybody who's a sibling out there, it is death until you part, death to part. I will be guardian of my sister until I die, or I become crazed or demented myself. And sometimes I really would not like to have to take part in yet one more IEP meeting, one more ISP, I should say.
I was going to say, she doesn't have IEPs anymore, does she?
No. One more ISP, one more nasty email from a case manager wondering why I've let her food stamps lapse, because I haven't done the Michigan recertification. The Michigan recertification, which for some reason seems to take forever, to generate $16 a month in food stamps for my sister. I'm like, I'll give her the money rather than deal with Medicaid, with SNAP in Michigan yet again.
Right. Well, yeah. And I know that a lot of those, whatever rules and systems are in place to prevent people from taking advantage of it that shouldn't have it. but it really makes it difficult for the people that deserve it.
Well, and Michigan, I'll say it loud and clearly, their disability services for adults now have dramatically declined.
So let's just back up a second. You can say that because you actually operate in another state. So you have comparison, right?
I've got comparisons, and I've got lifetime with Gretchen in residential services.
Right. So please go on.
Yeah, we placed Gretchen. I think I was in grad school. Mm-hmm. Our mother had a terminal cancer diagnosis, and she went 23 years without going 6 months without chemotherapy, radiation, or surgery. But at the time of at the start of this in 78, 79, there was an agency in Lansing. It was the agency that we picked in the early 80s as the agency that we wanted.
Yep.
And it was going to be years. And, lo and behold, they had an opening for a female. Amazing. Gretchen was not ready. Nobody was ready. But with mom's diagnosis, we took the placement.
And honestly, you want to take that placement when you can get it. Because you don't know when it's going to come again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then, so I can speak to the services that were available in the 80s through now in Michigan, like why the Guardian in Michigan, because Gretchen's living in an apartment program with minimal supports, which is working for her at this point in time.
This is in the 80s you're talking about right now.
Now she started in a group home, in a 16-bed group home.
Okay, because that was what was available.
That was, and it was and I, at that point in time, was running a group homes myself. It was 8 bedrooms, double bedrooms, 2 walk-in closets, and 1 bathroom for every 2 people. It was a very nice, high.
It's actually pretty. That's a nice layout.
Pretty state of the art for late 80s, I have to say, mid 80s, brand new buildings. So
particularly the bathrooms.
Yeah, bathrooms for everybody that were accessible.
That's almost unheard of.
Yeah. So, the Guardian in Michigan now, I have to do the benefit redeterminations. I have to do the Medicaid crap.
And that's all new.
Yeah, I did not have to do that a decade ago. Michigan has said, there's a Guardian. We won't do any of the paperwork anymore.
Interesting.
The case managers don't do it. So on the things that, I'm up there in age and I'm looking at having to deal with Gretchen's benefit administration for the rest of my life, as long as she's in an apartment program. And Michigan has, unlike other states, and in many ways foolishly, because it costs Michigan Medicaid reimbursement money.
Okay.
Their pound, penny wise, pound foolish, in that they have decoupled funding streams and are not making better use of the home and community-based waiver systems that exist for people with disabilities. And
why do you think that is? Because you said it's change, right? It wasn't.
It's been as Michigan's economic performance has declined, they have made some significant cuts and ongoing reduced funding levels to people with disabilities.
Okay.
And if you are somebody like Gretchen, who partly falls between the cracks, she, could qualify for 24-hour staffing. Mm-hmm. She won't tolerate it. And she doesn't completely need it. But at the same point in time, she needs more staffing than what she has today in the budget at times. And so it becomes a real push and pull, because Michigan funds this through she gets funded through 2 or 3 different blended home health aid funding systems. So the staff is X today. When they're grocery shopping tomorrow, they're in a different budget line. And where other states...
is this like community living services versus, I forget, they're like 2 different categories of how the time is spent?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Could you just tell me I can't remember what they are. I'm a layperson.
Yeah, I know. I quite honestly.
So they get different buckets and they get paid differently, right?
Yes.
Because isn't the caregiver paid differently for the community living services than they are for respite? Or it's not respite,
Yeah,
it's
it's
like
not right,
it's
but
an
it's the home
equivalent.
health aid the
Yeah.
community have.
Okay.
You know, in other states, they have Ohio, New York, Florida, New Jersey have waiver programs where for the disabled, where it's all one bundled waiver service.
So you just get paid.
Yeah. So the agency providing the support has, you know, the service plan is all encompassing with really two funding streams, because you have the Social Security for the room and board factor.
Yep.
If the Social Security doesn't pay the total cost of the room and board, the state or housing grants or subsidies makes that up. Food stamps, SNAP, and then the Medicaid waiver pays the staffing and the management and things like that. And Michigan just, you know, I live in New York. I run a nonprofit here in New York. We have services in New York, New Jersey, Florida. We have trust beneficiaries also living in Minnesota, Montana, and now California, Ohio, and Massachusetts. And so I'm well acquainted with waiver services around the country,
right,
for people with disabilities. New York, one of New York's waivers is as complex and convoluted and awful as it could be. But even then, it's better than the Michigan waiver or whatever it is that my sister has to deal with community mental health funding and the different budget lines and trying to figure it out. She was going to have knee replacement surgery, and she does not. So after her knee replacement surgeries 3 times now, you know, I could not get, for months in advance, Michigan through community mental health boards to increase her home staffing.
Even though she's going to need additional support recovering from surgery.
We don't do that in Michigan.
Right. We can't temporarily support someone that has a physical challenge, right? Like, okay.
Yeah. And my dear sweet sister, who does not follow rules, cannot be left alone with a new knee.
Well, no, because she's going to try and work. She's going to try and put pressure on it or whatever. It's not going to heal correctly, and she's going to have surgery again.
The physical therapist didn't believe me and was kind of arguing with me, and I'm yelling, "Watch it! She's already out of the wheelchair, pivoting to get into the tub on the test to put her new knee, carrying her leg over the rim of the tub to step down on it because the therapist wasn't watching her."
Right.
And so we knew, you know, if my sister says yes to the doctor that she knows she will not take a bath, we all know she's lying. She does not like showers. She will tell anybody that she will not take a bath. She's going to be in the tub if she's unobserved, on a new knee and things like that. And community mental health refused to pay for it. So we had extra weeks in a nursing home because they wouldn't pay for it. Now, in other states, that would have been a no-brainer.
Right.
Yeah.
It would just been a part of like the service.
The service. We're going to increase for 4 weeks. We'll assess it at the end of 4 weeks, whatever it was. You know, 2 weeks in nursing home rehab, because I would have agreed to that without any problem.
Of course.
Yeah. So it just was not, it is not a system. And don't even get me started on their 3 different flavors of job services.
I will not. No,
yes. Yeah. No, I mean, it's so as the, you know, and I look at them, and I have successfully had to take community mental health to court on several occasions for their violation of Medicaid rules and eliminating services. Now, I'm in the field. They know I'm in the field.
Right.
They know I successfully represented children in Ohio.
In the same cases. Yeah.
Oh, well, in Ohio, they decided that growing children at one point in time couldn't get new wheelchairs. I ran an 84-bed facility for severely multiply impaired children in Ohio.
Right.
And I successfully forced the state, including rewriting the rules and the statute, so that children, as they grew in Medicaid, could get new wheelchairs when they needed them, not every 5 years or more.
Right. It's not just some arbitrary number. Instead, it's like based on need.
So at one point in time, I was on the head of the care management group, on the phone with the head of the care management group, and just said, so you held an ISP without notifying the guardian. You did not.
You're in this many violations. This is a problem.
Let's start one.
Yeah.
Start two, you greatly reduced the services for my sister. Start three, you implemented that plan reduction without authorization or notification of the guardian. Step four, you have not met any of the Medicaid criteria for this. Step five, you're not meeting her health and safety. Just where do you think you're going to end up when I start my Medicaid appeals on you?
Right. That's all it goes to go.
Yeah. How do you want to handle this, that your team has screwed up? And this is what, for siblings who are relatives, I mean, this is what, I do for a living.
Right.
I feel greatly for siblings who do not have the advantages of a lifetime of experience in the system and addressing these items.
So thinking more about that and about being a sibling and making these vital decisions all the time that you're making, how do you balance your own life while still supporting your sister?
I work very hard on not taking calls from her every hour and a half or so.
Sure. You set some boundaries.
Set some boundaries. I do listen to the voicemails relatively frequently after the call, because she, instead of calling for staff, she may call me when she has fallen at 1 a.m. and dislocated her elbow and has to go to the hospital. So
you're evaluating the level of emergency
versus this is just good morning. I want to say hi. How are you?
You're triaging the calls. You're like, okay, thank you for thank you. That was very nice.
So then on my personal sanity, and for those siblings out there whose mothers, and it's always the mother, no offense, Wendy, it's always the mother who makes the clothing color coordinate and perfectly match at home and expects that in residential programs and expects it in, and my mom, God bless her, and the cleaning lady, 2 to 4 times a year while mom was alive, would go over to the apartment and deal with all the clothes, throw them out, get rid of them, make sure everything was clean and unstained, and do a major cleaning and reorganization. Big brother does not have the patience, the desire, the bandwidth to sit there and argue with my sister for 3 days over the clothing and throwing crap out. Especially
when she's probably attached to some of those.
And it doesn't matter what she's attached to. I mean, the junk just multiplies. She's a 13-year-old girl who really has hundreds of stuffed animals.
So it's like she's like got Velcro when she goes to like the Walgreens or whatever, because she's just picking up 3 more stuffed animals.
I banned her from shopping at dollar stores. And I turned off her card because she would spend $150 to $200 at the dollar store and not come home with any laundry detergent.
My daughter has a tendency to do that, Five Below. Yeah.
I have a great product. I don't offer it. It's something that I talk to all parents and guardians about professionally. It's called TrueLink Visa Debit Card. And you get to, for $10 a month, you can put money on this wonderful debit card at whatever frequency you choose. And you can turn off all sorts of categories and stores where it can no longer be used. And you can set notices. And so it's a wonderful product for those of us out there struggling with our siblings' spending problems.
It's a great idea. I mean, we do the same thing. It's called Greenlight.
Yeah.
And then you can monitor the account, right? And you can choose to put money in it or not.
Right.
And it helps to control all that. What is that called? That's the spending outside of rent and food and I forget the category, but
and with TrueLink, I don't know the product you're using, you can turn off, like professionally, just before this call, I turned off bars and liquor for one of our clients. You can turn off all of these product lines or vendors through TrueLink that you typically can't do through other credit card or debit card options. So I'd be very interested, Wendy, in hearing that after this call.
Yeah, we could talk about it after the call for sure. I want to say it does something similar, but we can get into the details for sure. So I guess the one thing I did want to ask you is there a story you might be able to share when you felt especially proud of your sister?
Well, there is. Yeah, I mean, the world has come a long way. When my partner and I announced we were getting married,
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. It was not legal in the United States. We got married in Windsor. We're among the first gay couples who got married in Windsor, Canada. And Gretchen was just hilarious leading up to the wedding. You're going to be husband, and then giggling uncontrollably, and husband. When it sank into her, it was just so funny. And, my poor husband, who has known Gretchen now for 33 years and backs me up with Gretchen and also takes the calls and works with her. And, we fly her to New York 5-6 times a year. Deals with all the LaGuardia and airport problems, she managed to lock herself in the bathroom on a Delta flight as it was landing at LaGuardia and refused to come out of the bathroom and said she was sick. They routed the plane directly in for an emergency landing and took her off on a bodyboard. And so as we're walking up to the airport, I get a call literally from the Port Authority police asking, "Are you Mr. Lee Ackerman? Are you Mr. Lee Ackerman, guardian of Gretchen?" This is the Port Authority police. Wow. I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but what are you going to do? She has managed to bring a plane into landing, made everybody stay on board, and she's in the LaGuardia hospital because she locked herself in the bathroom because she had to pee, because the staff let her drink a big gulp Slurpee or something at Detroit before she got on the plane. So I was most proud. I'll go back at the wedding. She got there. She was our flower girl. Our stepmom, my stepmom was tasked with making sure. I said, these are the 24 hours where, she's down at my house, but I don't want to worry about her. I don't want to deal with the hair, the dress, whatever happens. She's all yours. And she just spent the night beaming and having a great time and laughing about husband and husband. On the other side too, the last several years, we have made significant progress. Since I've been guardian, she has managed to be run over in her wheelchair by not following safety rules and getting 2 of the other people from the apartment program run over.
Oh my God.
She has run away from the apartments at 9:00 at night in her wheelchair in January in her pajamas because by God, she was going fingernail polish shopping.
Okay.
Yes. And while we still have injuries and problems, we have not caught her making macaroni and cheese and boiling water on her own in the past several years. She has dealt with COVID and isolation far better than any of us would have thought. And she is better at living within her physical disabilities, which results in less emergencies and hospitalizations and problems. And so the apartment program and her right now are as good as we've ever been. And that's saying a lot. And God bless her staff. She's actually a high school, 5th grade classmate of mine. So it means I know exactly how old Teresa is because from 5th grade through high school, we went to school together. And poor Teresa has been working with my sister for over 25 years. when Teresa retires, I'm going to kill myself. I mean, just, I'm like, oh my, no, you can never
You
retire.
would also say maybe Teresa can start training someone now
Yes,
for succession planning.
well, the problem is it's Michigan and reimbursement. The agency does not have.
You're right.
I understand that.
So I guess the last thing I'd like to ask you, and because I know we're running a little short on time here, but for parents and adult siblings on this journey, what advice might you give them? Just like one piece.
One piece. I can do several. Pick your battles, plan early, involve the adult children, realistic expectation of your adult children, communicate. Recognize everybody's skill sets and pick your battles. I encourage families and siblings. It is hard to be a guardian. It is hard to be the healthcare proxy if the individual doesn't have a guardian. It's a pain in the butt to serve as a power of attorney. However, those are the vital things that service providers cannot do. Being a trustee is a pain in the ass. I run trust. It's a pain. It's what we do for our corporation, our nonprofit here. But that, pick the important things that family members do and do best, and then decide how you're going to do the other things. And make sure that communication is there early on, and that the planning's realistic.
Yeah.
That would be my biggest item, because, if you have siblings, I'm in New York now. I lived in Michigan until 17 and a half years ago, and lived, worked, and was there until I relocated. People don't stay in the hometown.
Right.
And if you have multiple children, talk to all of them, include all of them in the planning, and figure out what works best. And if you have a child with a mental health or significant behavioral issues or mental health diagnoses, really make sure where the burdens lie, and that there are options instead of siblings having to say no or dealing with a significantly behaviorally or mentally ill relative at all times, because that's a drainer. That's just a drainer.
Absolutely. And just having those plans in place to involve, like crisis management plan and a behavioral management plan and all those things. So that way it's not falling to the sibling to go and figure all that out.
Yeah. And, parents, as you were saying at the beginning, when there's an option for placement, take it.
Yep.
Take it while you're alive.
Yep.
See how it's going. Provide
you can help give feedback on decisions.
Yeah. Be there and make those transitions. Professionally, I'm always saddened when people say their child can't take change. Well, change is going to happen. And by not providing some change up front, working on change, when parents die, it's a holy nightmare for the other siblings, and more importantly, the disabled individual. Right. They've lost their parent, their caregiver, they've lost their home, their landlord, and all at once.
Yep.
And I understand that change is difficult, and many people have behavioral problems during periods of change, but that sets up the siblings and the child for a horrible transition. And I cannot tell you professionally the amount of times that I speak with parents in their 70s, siblings in their 50s, who are saying, Mom, Dad, we have to do something. And parents, unfortunately, struggle with this. I understand that. Nobody can do it like Mom, and that is correct. But somebody's going to end up doing it. And why don't we make it work while you're around to make the transition possible?
Right. And you can make it gradual. You can pick pieces, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing I always think about is like I knew a family, I think they started off where it was like 2 days a week, then it was 4 nights, and then it was whatever. Eventually, you got to nights and days, and then it was, weeks at a time. And I think they did over a 2-year period. And
That's
they had the luxury of time at that point because they chose while the individual was young enough and they could still keep the connections and the dinners, like having family dinners and all that kind of stuff. So they could work out what that person was really comfortable with. So it was gradual.
right. Most of the transitions don't permit that much time.
Yeah.
If it's into a residential program.
You're right. If it's a residential program, you make the move. You're right.
You make the move. But having said that, Gretchen was home every other weekend forever.
Right. You could still go visit them a lot.
Yeah.
You could still take them to shopping once. I mean, you can wean them off seeing you all the time,
right,
but still be in their new place.
And set the parameters and encourage. I mean, we worked, Lee went away to college. Lee went away to grad school.
Yeah.
Lee bought his own house. You beat him to your own place,
Right.
And those transitions, because it is a part of life.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's a scary world out there, and we understand that. But we also know these are the realities that our system has today, whether in Michigan or Ohio or New York. These are the supports that are available. There are better providers than others, but we won't know until you're there.
Yeah.
And not looking means you have misconceptions. I am constantly fighting with people as part of my professional duties. Parents have this view of what a group home is like. Oh, there's 16 people living in a place. Well, that was what my sister moved into nearly 40 some years ago. Today, most new programs are 3 to 4 people, small home. Everybody has their own bedroom, usually private bedrooms. It's a completely different world. And, the quality of the agency, get involved. If you're a sibling, get involved with that agency. Every agency typically needs an incident report review committee member to meet their Medicaid compliance requirements for accidents and incidents that happen to their clients, and recommendations for quality insurance and changes. It's a thankless committee. That agency is always looking for people.
Yeah,
they always need volunteers. They always look for participation, and to help look at the quality and support of services for your sibling. There are places to get involved that will not drive you crazy, but can also reassure you as to the quality of the agency. If you're on a committee like that and seeing things you don't like, that tells you need to be bugging the care manager for a new placement. What other agencies are out there? What other programs are there? Working through the executive director and the management team of that agency to pick a better location or environment.
Makes sense. Well, thank you so much for that. And I want to just thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your story. I know because it's not my lived experience, I can only imagine how hard it is to be a sibling and to be a guardian. As a parent, it's just different. But again, I think it's a unique perspective that deserves to be heard and shared. And because you guys are adult siblings are an essential part of this community. So thank you so much for being here today.
You're very welcome. And if the 16-year-old who ended up with a girl in a wheelchair on the hood of your car here's this podcast, I'm very sorry.
Oh my God. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, that's the call we got. Gretchen was the ringleader in her wheelchair and managed to get her and 2 other people run over, and her wheelchair was on the hood of a brand new 16-year-old girl's driver's license in downtown Lansing.
Well, hopefully she's gotten some therapy or some support. So
Yes.
I hope that worked out. But thank you again for joining us. And for those of you listening in, I hope that you will consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing this podcast with others who may find it meaningful. Please join us next time on Let's Plant Houses. Take care.